So welcome to another episode of What to Say and How to Say It. I'm with our favorite licensed professional counselor, Kyle Hargrove, today. We're going to be digging into a tough topic. If you have conflict, chances are that makes you a little bit uncomfortable, nervous, or terrified. Like, let's be real. Nobody loves this stuff, but it is an opportunity for connection. We want to have a conversation today that leaves you feeling a little bit more confident. And if you don't do this well, you stand to lose depth in your relationship, connection with the person that you're married to, and gain some resentment and actually not walk out what Jesus is calling all of us to do, which is walk in truth, walk in freedom, and encourage one another. So we're going to learn how to do that in some very specific ways today. One of the things that gets me super stoked about this topic is that we're dealing with people that are in committed married relationships. We're talking to people whose marriage is a mess or challenged, or, they search conflict because no, we have it. What do we do? And the neat thing about marriage is that there's a commitment there. It's a legal mess. Like, it is a hot disaster to try to untangle the financial connection, overlap, just all of that. So you're committed, and the relationship packs a punch that uncommitted, unlegally married, when you're not legally married, you're not dealing with the same thing. We see this in the work that we do, that the level of commitment makes a huge difference. And so if you're married, this is for you. If you're not married and you're wondering, what am I getting into? This is also for you. You're going to walk away with some decent awarenesses around how to do this differently. So Kyle, conflict, disagreement. Most people are freaking out going, I don't want any part of this. What do you say to them?
I say a truth about life on this planet is conflict is. Period.
Yeah, it is.
I don't think there's any relationship that we can enter into and maintain for any length of time where we're not going to experience conflict, disagreement, differences of opinion, interpreting things differently, and that not only affects the knowledge that we have, it affects the feelings that we carry about those things. And a lot of times we let our feelings about things carry into our relationship and turn into our feelings about one another.
Mm-hmm. Fair.
And the conflict, it's not the hard part to identify, and it's not the hard part to know is coming. The hard part is the step after conflict. In a healthy relationship, we move intentionally with confidence into a stage of confrontation.
Okay, so let's talk about that. Because most people are just mad because, he didn't or she didn't do the thing they said they were going to do, or they said something that was insensitive, mean, or whatever. And here you are saying we move into this space of confrontation intentionally. Wait, what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why would I do that? Well, I don't think there's any secret that we live in a world right now where conflict and confrontation are avoided at a rate never seen before. I think that most of us hear the words conflict or confrontation, and we automatically assess a negative value to them.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's a negative value to the process, then it's going to turn out negative toward me or toward my relationship. Therefore, I don't want to do that.
We've been conditioned, right, to be afraid of it because we see other people on social media, and we've seen people in our homes spew verbal violence all over each other with hateful, unskilled reaction versus intentional response. So the conflict that we do see is horrible.
Yes.
Nobody wants any of that. But there's more. That's not the only option.
No, it's not. And the hard part about moving constructively through conflict and confrontation is the communication piece. And, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to go back in the last 3 or 4 years with our younger people and see where communication has been minimized.
Mm.
Being out of school for a year or two didn't help that at all. Socialization has been minimized.
Mm-hmm.
We see more socially awkward teenagers and young adults right now than ever in the history of the world.
Yes.
And they are going into relationships now at that age. And their understanding is, if we have conflict, this relationship can be tossed and I can find another one,
Mm-hmm.
because I'd rather do that than deal with reality.
Yep.
Because conflict and confrontation are bad. If we have an argument, it means we're breaking up.
Yep. That's fair. That right there. One argument equals the end of everything. And that is the thing. And you see them talking to each other, sitting across the coffee table at Starbucks, texting. They're texting, and they're like, everybody needs to grow up, but they don't know what to do. So let's get some schooling here. What do people
Now,
need
let me ask you a question, Nina.
Okay.
Total transparency.
Oh gosh. Okay.
Have you ever texted your husband across the house?
Absolutely. It usually says, "Hey, can you take the dog out?" Like, fair. And he does the same thing to me. Can you take the dog out? Because the dog will be at the door.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then and I'll be in the middle of something, and I can hear the whine. My husband can too if I'm not down there. But all my dogs have come all the way upstairs to say, "Excuse me." But we have a new puppy that doesn't know this part yet. So
Yes.
he just sits at the door and cries, and I text him. So I do that, but hardly ever though, because that's just not communicating.
Right. Well, and this period of time right now, and I don't know exactly how far back we go with it, but this period of time that we're living in right now, people's lives are consumed with social media, technology, and things that make life easier.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. When we talk about healthy relationships, embracing confrontation, we never say it's easy.
Fair.
But it's necessary.
Mm-hmm.
And when we do it well, because we have been educated and we have the skills in our toolkit to do it well, it's highly beneficial. We talk frequently about the growth in relationships coming when people go through conflict together and they come out on the other side of it still holding hands. That's how we grow. Growth doesn't come if we don't get challenged.
So let's give our listeners some practical stuff here. How do you walk into this and do it well?
Okay. Well, obviously the things that I just mentioned is, going through a process, through therapy or through workshops or conferences or reading books or whatever, that help us understand the components of a healthy confrontation, and making the commitment that when we realize there's conflict, that we're not going to bail out or jump off.
Mm-hmm.
I'll stick with you through this.
Yeah.
I may not like everything I hear. It may not all feel good, and vice versa. But let's do this so that we can not have this hanging around our necks any longer, because confrontation that's not confronted turns into baggage that we carry with us.
So what you're really saying is that you need a mindset of, we don't let the sun go down. Basically, I mean, and maybe that's not biblical that day. It's about our anger.
But it's good Montana stuff right there. That's
we keep short accounts. That's a better one,
yes.
Right? Meaning okay, I'm still 2 days into 3 days and I'm still ticked about what happened Saturday. Okay, what does the Bible tell me? I'm upset with him. I need to go. Or if he's upset with me, he needs to come. Or if I know he's upset with me, then I need to go. Like if there's awareness of the problem, we got to go.
Yeah.
So let's say I make the decision. I've got the mindset. I've had enough training, enough healing that I'm like, all right, I'm going to go. I'm going to do this thing. From what you see people do when they do this well, what do I need to know going into that?
I need to know that we've committed to one another that we're going to handle this situation, whatever it is, with kindness and respect.
Mm-hmm.
If we know that we're going to do that, I think we can handle anything regardless of what the topic might be. It doesn't, kindness and respect doesn't necessarily dictate the outcome or decisions that have to be made, but they allow us to get to that place without the breaking up part.
Mm-hmm.
So I like to relate this to, and channel my inner Kenny Rogers and say, you got to know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to walk away, and certainly know when to run. If things are flying, whether they're coming out of a weapon or not, it's time to run. But in these confrontations, we have to have the understanding and the agreement. What's the common phrase used right now that seems to be so proper is read the room. See what's going on, pay attention. The dynamics are important and they mean something.
Mm-hmm.
And they're that way in a confrontation between two people as well. Read the room, read the conversation, read the situation and say, how are we doing emotionally? Are we allowing things to elevate and get out of hand? And there's a point where at that point, rather than damage one another with out of control kind of stuff, we agree we're going to stop.
Yep.
And what kind of break we take depends on where we are or where we're not.
Yep. No, that's fair. One of the things I love about that is that, if you read the room, you're going to have insight in a space that matters more than the actual conflict or a confrontation. Last week, I was talking to somebody that I'm very close to, and it was a time we were going to have a discussion around a conflict. And he just seemed a little off. Now, this is not my husband, by the way. But it seemed a little, and I said, so scale of 1 to 10, 10 being, hey, I'm all in, let's do this, I'm perfectly ready. 1 being, yeah, I'm not feeling so awesome. I'm kind of something about this. Where are you? And he said, I'm about a 3. I said, okay, so tell me about that. And we had a completely different discussion because he was already thinking about something else that I was not even aware of. I had no idea this was even on the landscape. So we had the conversation about that instead. And I was able to own some things in that space and apologize. And then, an hour had gone by and I said, I still think we need to talk about this other thing, but I feel like we kind of made some headway with, where you were at and all that. And he's like, yeah, I really want to talk about that too now. And I said, well, how about we do that next week? And so he was able to set it on the shelf, and I am too. And I'm thankful, because if I'd have kept pressing for my agenda to solve that problem, it would have gone off the rails.
Yeah.
So that's kind of one of the main things that I've had as an awareness, is that what you think you're there to talk about may seem like that at the beginning, but if you don't read the room, you may be missing something really important about what actually you should be talking about in that moment, instead of what the conflict is. Because if it's a vehicle for connection, you get there however you get there. That's God's way. Here's the way, walking it. Like, here's the way, presenting you the way, and we miss it half the time.
Exactly. Just because it's not how I thought we would get there or what I expected, or, I had this speech prepared and now it doesn't really fit the narrative quite as much as it did. So what? Throw it away.
Yep.
Take advantage of the situation that's in front of you and the transparency and the vulnerability, because doing good confrontation requires all of those things. Another thing that I want to mention, and I think we've probably spoken of this maybe multiple times in other podcasts before, but I want to mention that a good confrontation, a confrontation that leads to a positive outcome, requires that both people understand the reason we're sitting here doing this is to resolve the issue. It's not to decide who was right or wrong, or who's wronger or meaner or nastier or anything like that. The objective of this conversation and this confrontation is to resolve, to fix, to move forward, to restore if we need to. And that involves humility. It involves the willingness, like you said, to own. It involves the willingness to forgive.
Yeah.
And we cannot resolve and move forward without those components being in there.
So if a couple has a disagreement, say, about what they should do for schooling for one of their kids, the wife thinks option A, husband thinks option B. and they come into that conversation to try to solve that problem. What's also true is there's probably good reason and maybe even some woundings and emotional attachment for some reason that isn't relevant to even what's happening right now.
Exactly.
But it was relevant when she was 12 or he was 12, and what happened to them. And so, having this opportunity to you kind of really open to the leading of the Spirit in the communication. And I love that phrase, read the room, because when you come back to that, you can sense the nonverbals if there's something deeper here. And if you don't get to that, you don't really resolve anything. You don't end up with a decision.
Yeah. And also, one of the things that I like to encourage people to not do in this space is to write the script prior to the conversation. If we're going to allow the Holy Spirit to have room in this space to act and to move, our script is going to get in the way more often than not.
Yeah.
And so when we go into that with an idea in our mind of the outcome, that means, well, I'm going to do this and I'm going to say that. And, for it to come out that way, I've got to do certain things. And if that's what I'm focused on, I'm probably going to miss a lot of opportunity in there for healing. I'm probably going to miss a lot of opportunity in there for actually resolving this thing. Because resolving doesn't necessarily mean that we're both going to 100% agree on the outcome. It means that we move toward one another instead of vilifying one another. And we see a lot of that. And one of the easiest ways to identify that is to listen to the volume in that room. Talk about reading the room, read the volume, listen to what's going on. When we allow our voices to raise and our volume to raise, we typically lose sight of resolution, and we start looking for things to grab a hold of to either use as a weapon or to at least defend our position.
Right.
Because raising your voice means trying to take more control.
Yeah.
And if I raise mine and then you raise yours in response to that or reaction to that, then I'm going to raise mine again. And if we're trying to take control, actually what we tend to do is lose it. And once we lose control and we're not thinking clearly, that's when ugly things happen. And these are the confrontations that we have in our, embedded in our mind, that we've either seen or been a part of before, that scare us sometimes, frighten us from moving forward and taking the risk to confront again, even with a better set of tools.
Yeah. Well, and I think the point there too is that this, just because you're having a conversation doesn't mean you have to resolve it right now. Jesus told us, seek ye first the kingdom of God, right? So what does that mean in a situation like this? Well, I think it means to seek to understand, seek what God has for you, seek what God has for this other person, try to understand their position first. That's what leaders do. They serve first. And so you listen first. That's a servant's heart in that space. And then you may learn something and you may end up going, oh, I don't actually disagree with this. Like, how many times has that happened? That's embarrassing. If we, and to your point about, practicing our closing arguments, basically, if we're coming into a discussion, having ruminated to the point where we've practiced what we're going to tell them, like, no, wow, wrong heart going into that altogether. And yeah, everybody's done that. But if you're doing it, stop. That's the worst place. We do have key phrases we ask people to practice and use, but they're for very specific situations, like when things go off the rails, so we want to, hey, I love you. Let's take a break from this and we can be kind and respectful. That's different than, well, the reasons I think this is boom, 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 no, let's do that differently.
Yeah, there's a lot of intentionality that goes into this. And one of the things that I like to encourage people, especially if I'm working with a couple and we're gonna step in it. Okay, here we go. All right, here we are. There it is. It's time to go there. And so I'll ask them, are you ready to approach this with an open mind? And usually they'll pretty much instantly say yes. Sometimes, and I really kind of even appreciate, sometimes there's a little hesitancy because at least they're being honest. I don't know if I'm
Yeah.
ready to do that yet or not. But unfortunately, there's a misunderstanding around what having an open mind means. And when you go into a confrontation and you've committed to have an open mind, what that needs to mean, and this is hard for some people will get stuck here and say, okay, I'm not going in yet.
Mm.
Because having an open mind in a confrontation means I'm willing to accept the possibility that I need to change my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And being open-minded, I think to most of us means, okay, I'll hear you out.
Yeah.
All right, but that's it. I'll hear you out. I'll give you your time. I took mine, blah, 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 blah. But it
Yeah.
doesn't mean
Yeah.
I'm willing to accept the possibility that I'll need to change my mind.
Yeah. No, that's actually really, really important. Gottman's research shows that in couples that divorce, 87% of the time, a factor is the husband won't receive influence from the wife. Now, in general, women are more agreeable than men, which means that, we keep conflict at arm's length more than men do generally. We're more agreeable in the way that we communicate because we know that conflict is bad for infants. We're in a nurturing role. And that doesn't mean that women don't do conflict. As husbands are listening to this going, you haven't seen my wife. I'm like, yeah, I know what she looks like. I've been her. It's not pretty. So there's that. But women, the whole influence thing, we need to align with that also, because we're so afraid of being influenced. So much so that, sometimes we've given our voices away, that when it actually matters, then that in and of itself causes a ton of stress. And so what do you do with that? Well, you navigate through conflict as an adult, and you take a break when you start to get emotional, because nobody wants to do conflict with a 2-year-old. So we need to keep that in mind so that we can behave like grown-ups and do the right thing. So what would you send our listeners home with today?
Understand the need to not only not just understand that confrontation is going to need to happen, but to be willing to let it happen. A lot of people are willing to walk through that process as things come along. That's probably going to be someone like myself. I'm willing to walk through it because when it happens, I want to deal with it. But not everybody's that way. And your partner, your spouse may be the person who doesn't deal with things as they come, but kind of stores them away and locks them up.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a fighter. I'm a lover. I don't like to fight. I would rather deal with something when it's at this level than when it's at that level. Because when it's at that level, if I either get hooked into a real argument, or I just decide, heck with it, I'm going in.
Mm-hmm.
I forget the rules. I forget my promises. I forget. I go in to win.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be there. I know myself that well.
Mm-hmm.
If you drag me into a knockdown drag out, I'm going to be throwing punches. I know me that well.
Yeah.
So I want to avoid that at all costs. And for me, that means let's address it as it happens. Let's not let these things stack up.
Yep.
So if I had one thing to say is, stay in the present as much as you can. Don't go forward, leaving other things in the past, because when they're in the past, you got to drag them along behind you.
Mm-hmm.
And then those are become things. And I love the saying, don't trip over things that are behind you.
Yes.
And we allow that to happen. And if we drag them back up and say, okay, now we've got to talk about it. Well, things may have changed. The stories don't get remembered exactly the same way. There are a lot of different factors that can come into play. So keep it present.
That's solid advice. And I want to also highlight something else you said about winning. This should never be about winning. Is there an outcome we prefer? Absolutely. But when we are doing conflict in marriage and we want to win, we have to understand that means the relationship and the other person loses. If the other person loses, the relationship loses, then we lose. That's how we need to be looking at that.
Yes.
So win, win, win. I love 9 Lies That Will Destroy Your Marriage, the book by, I think it's Greg Smalley. Anyway, the point of that is that there's a no losers policy in the relationship, meaning we're not out to win. We're going to do what God wants.
Mhm.
So, yeah. So thanks, Kyle, for being around and talking about this super popular topic. The one everybody dreads. But yeah, I'm glad.
Everybody get out there and fight.
Yeah. No. Yeah. So anyway, I'm glad you guys were here, and we want to invite you over to our website for a free PDF, 5 tools to stop walking on eggshells. You can go grab your copy of that, and be sure to check out some of our online courses. You don't have to be stuck where you're at. You can move forward and have the relationship that you're looking for. greaterimpact.org. That's where we can help you. Have a great day.